The night the water came, Nor was awake, listening to the wind scrape the walls like long nails. That was when the old river made a sound it had never made before, a deep, broken roar that felt alive. Nor knew, without knowing why, that nothing in the valley would ever be the same again. The river was no longer a river, it was a moving wall, and it was coming for them. Nor lived in a low wooden house near the bend, where the water usually slowed and sang softly against stones. People believed they were safe there because the floods of the past had always stopped short. The land had always seemed to draw a line the river would not cross. But weeks of heavy rain and melting snow from distant mountains had erased that line. He stepped outside into the cold rain and smelled torn earth and crushed plants. In the moonlight he saw the water climbing over the banks like a thief testing a door. It was moving fast, carrying branches, stones, and broken fences as if they were weightless. Nor's chest tightened because the water was speeding up, not slowing down. He ran inside and woke his mother. She had lived by the river her whole life and trusted it like an old friend, but when she saw Nor's face, she did not argue. She simply nodded and began to pack what little they could carry. Outside, dogs barked and people shouted as the rain struck the roofs harder. The river crossed the yard and soaked Nor's boots with icy force. Fear finally cut through him, clear and sharp, telling him that waiting would kill them. He pulled his mother toward the uphill road where the old stone watchtower stood, a place no one had ever thought of as a shelter. As they moved through the rising water, a loud crash sounded behind them. Nor turned just in time to see the neighbor's barn collapse and vanish beneath the flood. Wood snapped and disappeared as if it had never existed. Nor understood then that the flood was not just water, it was hunger. People fled their homes carrying children, blankets, and animals. Some carried nothing at all, having lost everything too fast to save it. The road itself became a river. Nor slipped and nearly fell, but strong hands caught him. It was Elra, the baker's daughter, her face pale and focused. Together they pushed forward while the water climbed from knees to thighs. A floating log struck someone's leg, and a scream cut through the storm. The cold tried to slow Nor's body, numbing his skin, but he forced himself onward because stopping meant being taken. When they reached higher ground, people gathered in shaking groups. The watchtower filled with fear, breath, and whispered prayers. Nor wrapped his mother in his coat and helped her sit. Only then did he look back at the valley. The moon reflected on a wide sheet of moving darkness where homes and fields had once been. The land was unrecognizable, broken into spinning pieces. Time lost meaning as the rain continued and the water crept closer to the tower. Whispers spread that even this place might not be high enough. Nor remembered something his father had once told him about an old spillway cut into the hill beyond the forest. Long ago, the river had flowed there before people forced it into a narrow path. Nor realized the flood was trying to return to that forgotten way. The valley was being destroyed because the water had nowhere else to go. If that path could be opened again, maybe the flood could be guided away. When Nor spoke, his voice surprised him with its strength. Some people doubted him, others were too tired to hope, but Elra listened. The miller listened too. Soon, a small group formed, driven not by certainty, but by the need to try. They tied ropes around their waists, shared lanterns, and stepped back into the flood. The forest was slick and dark, roots grabbing at their feet while the wind pushed against them. Nor led, guided by memory and instinct. They reached the old stone cut, buried under fallen trees and mud. Water pressed against it like a trapped beast. Nor felt a strange sadness, as if the river itself was crying. They worked with numb hands, pulling branches free and digging until their muscles burned. The water surged again and again, knocking them down and dragging them back by the ropes. More than once, Nor thought they would fail. Then the sound changed. The water shifted its weight and found the opening. With a sudden violent rush, it poured into the old channel, racing away from the valley. The force knocked them flat as the flood chose its forgotten path. Nor lay in the rain, gasping, tears mixing with water on his face. When he looked back, the flood around the tower had stopped rising. Slowly, almost gently, it began to fall. Dawn arrived pale and quiet. The valley was shattered, homes torn apart and fields buried in mud. But the watchtower still stood, and people were alive. They clung to each other, counting names and losses. In the days that followed, Noah did not feel like a hero. He felt tired and hollow as he helped recover bodies and rebuild what could be saved. Grief and gratitude lived side by side. The river returned to its bed, quieter now, changed. People talked about walls and control, but Noah remembered the old path and the lesson written into the land. Nature remembers, and water always seeks its way. Weeks later, green shoots pushed through the mud. Noah stood by the river with Elra, watching the current slide past. For the first time since the flood, he felt hope, quiet and steady. The story of the flood would be told for years, but what mattered most was not how much was taken, but how close they came to losing everything, and how, in the darkest hour, they chose to stand together instead of letting the water decide their end.